From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Some of you may not be aware of this, but America actually has two Independence Days. One celebrates America's freedoms from Britain's rule. Another holiday, Juneteenth, commemorates the day when a Union general came into Texas and gave an order that actually ended slavery. Now, you may be going to yourself like, wait, didn't the Emancipation Proclamation take care of that? And my answer to you is this. You actually thought the Confederate States obeyed the law. Okay, sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 25th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, Juneteenth. Joining us to talk more about it is Cynthia Robinson. Dr. Robinson is chair of the Department of Black Studies here at UNO. Thank you so much for being here and welcome.
My pleasure, Kathy. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Robinson, I want to start with the fact that we have 11 federal holidays in the United States. Juneteenth now on that list. Simply put, what is Juneteenth?
So Juneteenth is a celebration really of resistance. June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers rode into Galveston, Texas to inform enslaved people there about the Emancipation Proclamation 2 years earlier. So it is, of all of the other holidays, it is really the only one that specifically addresses Black experiences in this country.
Okay, and to fully understand what you've just said, I want to go back to the transatlantic slave trade and how it grew in the colonies. Pick it up from there, if you would.
So the transatlantic slave trade, which began in the mid-1400s, the 15th century, the Portuguese started it, then the Spanish got involved, and other European nations. So in this country, the 13 colonies, it would be the British that picked it up. I say to people, whatever European language you speak, those are the Europeans that colonized or enslaved the Black and brown people. So here in this country, we speak English, so that tells us that English-speaking people were the ones that enslaved and colonized this part of the world.
Okay. I want to throw a couple terms at you and ask you the difference between them. The Hollywood myth and the historical record.
The Hollywood myth is the docile slave, the gone with the wind, the happy, you know, I was just put here to, you know, massa, if you're sick, we sick. That's the Hollywood myth, which is a myth. And it really, what it does is it shows, it is designed to illustrate that Black people were happy being enslaved and that slavery was not a bad thing. That's a big fat lie, and it promotes white supremacy. The actual truth of it is that the resistance began on the way to the boat. You can best believe human beings fought back, period and point blank. So there's all kinds of rebellions and uprisings to really talk about that. There are legislation enacted like the Black codes, the slave codes, there are gun laws, policing, and all of that is connected to enslavement of African people in this country.
Okay, okay. So United States, if we're going back, we think about the cotton crop, right? And how slavery affected politics to a point where now we find ourselves in the Civil War.
Yes.
Right? Talk about that.
Slavery was very, very lucrative. It affected politics in the same way that it affects politics today, not slavery, but race. So this is race-based slavery. Slavery was old when Moses was young. The U.S. is called the peculiar institution of slavery because of it was just strictly race-based. Only Black people are going to be enslaved. Eventually, that's what led up to that. Black people being enslaved. And so then it justified, or it needed a justification for that. And so Black people are things, Black people are, you know, the other in a very devastating way, and constant African inferiority, Black inferiority. And all of this then builds white supremacy. And on top of all of that, I mean, it was a huge money-making business, huge money-making thing. And you could be poor, white, immigrant, and get wealthy from slavery. So slavery was not about to end. And Black people had to in slavery through bloodshed, and that's what really happened.
It was during that time, during the Civil War, that President Lincoln signs this Emancipation Proclamation, right? That abolishes slavery, correct?
Absolutely not. So the Emancipation Proclamation was signed actually in 1862. September 1862 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was actually signed. And it was signed really as a threat to the slaveholding society. So it was the states that wanted to secede from the Union. Only those states was where slavery was supposedly abolished. And it was still, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1862, it didn't even become valid until January 1, 1863, because what Abraham Lincoln did was he said, I will abolish slavery, or I will keep slavery, or I will have some slave and some free. But whatever I do to keep the Union together. So it wasn't because he had this great love of black people, but it was because the South has seceded. So he kind of did the Emancipation Proclamation and told them, you have until January 1 to come back to the Union. And if you do that, then I won't issue this Emancipation Proclamation. If you don't do that, this will be issued January 1. And it was issued January 1.
Okay, 1865.
Yes.
We
yes.
get to June 19th then,
Yes.
right? So talk about that particular day, June 19th.
General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas with about 7,000 mostly black troops from the North, New York and other places, and he rode in and he read his order number 3. And he, made this big showing of you all, there was an Emancipation Proclamation signed and issued 2.5 years earlier, and so you are now free. He's telling the enslaved people that. He tells the slave masters, these people are now free. And what he actually says is now the relationship is as one employer and employee relationship, and you're supposed to act like that. After 4 centuries.
I was going to ask you when or how it really was abolished, and you talked about anything else that you want to add to that.
So it was really abolished. The 13th Amendment actually was ratified in December 1865. So you go from it being issued as a threat in September 1862, and then it actually being valid January 1861, and then 2 years later, the end of the Civil War, and then Juneteenth 2 years after that, 1865, and then, the 13th Amendment. So that's 2.5 years after almost 3 years after the signing of the Emancipation.
Well, and then slaves are free, but they're still not allowed or encouraged to blend into society.
And still are not.
Why?
Race. The nature of slavery in this country was race-based. Black people are slaves, African people are slaves because they are black, and black people are inferior. So after slavery is over, black people are still inferior. Like, this is what has been taught. So after slavery ends, you have 10 years of Reconstruction, and after that, you have a whole slew of legislation and really white American terrorism. That's what began after enslavement, because people have been taught that black people are inferior and it's okay to do anything. And what also happened was the narrative of the Civil War was that of the northern whites fighting the southern whites, and the reason why was not because the North and South didn't like each other, but it's because these pesky black people, they were the ones that, they wasn't content to just keep their space and be in their place. And so because of them, now we have this Civil War. And so, as someone said, after the Civil War, black people fought and did all that to help the Union, but the Union did not do things to help black people. About 10 years of Reconstruction, which gave this country public education and all other kinds of things, and including the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. After that, there was a backlash, a white backlash, and this is where the white American terrorism begins. This is the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision in the 1890s. You have lynchings that go down, and I mean major lynchings that go down. We just had the commemoration of the Red Summer. That was 1919. So this all goes on really all the way until the Civil Rights Act, and really beyond, including till today.
Well, and I want to talk about more in terms of present day, and we're going to do that a little bit later. I'm going to tap into you in terms of your insight and try to help us figure out here how we move forward. In the meantime, I want to go back to all of those things that you said and how defeated people must have felt. And yet, Dr. Robinson, from what I read, they still wanted to celebrate their independence.
Absolutely.
So despite all that had been going on, they were free.
Absolutely.
And they said, you know what? We are going to celebrate, and I want you to talk with our viewers about the ways that people celebrated as we put up some photographs to kind of sync up with what you're saying.
So this began in Galveston, Texas, and it spread through Texas. Texas was the first state, I believe, to make Juneteenth a national holiday, a holiday. People in Texas celebrated Juneteenth way before the rest of the country. And you celebrate it through just community gatherings, barbecues, all kinds of other food things. It was truly a celebration, really, of freedom. And so you could do whatever you would want to do.
Very cool. I must say another thing that I was reading about as I was looking into this program is the folks in Houston were so pumped that they decided, you know what we're going to do? We are going to come together and we're going to raise $1,000 to purchase 10 acres of land that they then would be able to celebrate on. They would own it. And what was cool about that was not only did it help mark the occasion, right, but it helped them exercise their rights now as property owners. What do you think is important to know, not just about Emancipation Park, but just that whole act in general in terms of how it really set a stage for moving forward?
Because what they said was, we are free and we're going to do this regardless of whoever likes it, whoever agrees with it, we are going to do this. And so to do that in 1872, to have Emancipation Park, and this year will be the 150th celebration of Emancipation Park in Houston. And by the way, Emancipation Park is the oldest park in Texas. And it was also, until the 1950s, I believe it was, the only park that Black people in Houston could go to. So that's Emancipation Park. So it really speaks a lot about the continued fight and resistance that Black people have had against really white supremacy. It's a constant fight. And so you take your battles, you take your wins. You know, you fight the battles and you take your wins. And I see Emancipation Park as a win.
Okay. And you mentioned this earlier, 100 years later, Texas, right, recognizes. 100 years later. So when I even, preface that question, what are you thinking? You talked about, it's a long road. We're talking about a century, right?
157 years.
Yeah, for Texas, though, being the first state to recognize.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us what's going through your mind and in your heart when you hear somebody like me saying, and then 100 years later, right? It's a long journey.
I'm so glad they fought. I'm so glad that we continue to fight. That's what I think about. You just think about, this all began in the 1500s or the 1400s, and you get, through the 1500s and the Spanish and the 1600s, the 1700s, now your 1800s and the fight to end slavery, 1865. Finally, you get the Juneteenth and you get Emancipation Proclamation, and it's still a fight through Jim Crow, but they still keep fighting. We still keep fighting. So that's what goes through my mind. We're fighting and we're fighting back. And with the fight that they did, that means that we can, in Omaha, Nebraska, have this discussion. All these years later, in 2022, that's what goes through my mind. My great-grandmother raised me. She was born in 1904. And I just think about the fight that they had. And a lot of people didn't talk about slavery, what happened after slavery. They didn't talk about, maybe some people didn't talk about what happened during Jim Crow, but they kept fighting so that you and I could have this discussion today. That's really what I think about.
This program is actually going to be airing around Juneteenth, a very intentional thing on our part. As viewers, Nebraskans, are going through this weekend and they're seeing highlights from parades, or they're listening to sound bites from people like yourself in terms of what has happened, what is happening, and what the hope is will happen. What do you want people to be thinking about, Dr. Robinson? What's going to be top of mind as they are watching and listening?
I'm really thinking about a poem that I think I'm going to read at one of the celebrations. And there's a poem called America, Come Get Your Children. That's what I'm really thinking about. And it really, really speaks to the legacy that race-based slavery created in this country. So that because of race-based slavery, when slavery was over, we couldn't all just get along. We couldn't all just say, okay, and today that legacy of race continues. That legacy of white supremacy, that legacy of black and brown inferiority, all of that is a lie. That's what I really think about, and I want people to understand Juneteenth is really a celebration of fighting against that, but really that fight has lifted everyone up. Any of the fights that blacks have done have always lifted everyone up, but my goodness, we're tired of that fight.
Yeah, lifting in a way that we will witness this weekend. I mean, we are going to see exactly what you're talking about, that unification, people coming together and standing up for where they are and more importantly, how they arrived there. Talk to us a little bit about how Nebraska plans to mark Juneteenth in 2022.
Well, I know locally here in Omaha, there's going to be parades, there's going to be Freedom Festival, educational things, there's going to be kid-friendly things, family-friendly things, there's going to be entertainment, there's going to be things in Lincoln, I have been told. The NAACP here is going to be doing things, and so there's going to be all kinds of things going on.
Okay, we're going to put up video here now, and I want you to talk about what we're seeing. So President Biden signs the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act. I want to ask you, who initiated that action and what exactly is it meaning? I mean, what do we see here and what does that mean?
What you see on the left side of the screen, holding the pen, shaking her hand with the glasses on and the white blouse, is Miss Opal Lee. Miss Opal Lee at that time, I believe, was 90 years old. She is a native of Texas, and she has spent a huge chunk of her life fighting to make, first of all, bring Juneteenth awareness to all the other states in the country, and also then to make it a federal holiday. And so that happened last year. President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Opal Lee, and some other dignitaries, they signed it and made it a national holiday, June 19th.
Dr. Robinson, as long as we are on the topic of people, individuals, human beings who are fighting to make a difference, what other, in terms of Juneteenth, our topic today, what other names or even groups come to mind for you as being instrumental, either in big ways or small ways, to bring or lead this where you believe that it needs to go?
Not just Juneteenth then, you're talking about
big picture
awareness.
Yeah, anybody who's coming to mind that would have been instrumental.
Oh, well, Black Studies, of course. The Department of Black Studies here at UNO, we turned 50 this last academic year, and in order for there to be a Black Studies department, 54 UNO Black students went to jail November 10th, 1969. And because of their sacrifice, we now have a Department of Black Studies, and we turned 50 this last academic year. That's what comes to mind. Because of Black Studies, we can have discussions about Juneteenth in classes. We can have discussions about classical African civilizations. I created a course on race. We can talk about that. We can talk about race in Hollywood. We can talk about African American psychology. We can talk about African people all over this globe, and time and space and place. That's what Black Studies is. So when I think about Juneteenth and the fight for Juneteenth, or the fight for emancipation, I think about not just that physical liberation, but also mental liberation, also mental freedom, and that's what education does. So that's what comes to mind. Black Studies, all the people who throughout the several centuries, 5 centuries or so of the African experience in this part of the world, all those people who fought for justice, all those people who fought for what was right. That's what I think about.
Including you, and I want to ask you, given what you've just said, what does it mean to be the chair of the department that you've just described?
It is very humbling to me. I came to UNO specifically to major in Black Studies. It is very humbling to me to now be the chair of the department that houses the discipline that is so important to me, and is so important to our understanding of each other, so important to our understanding of the way the world works, the human family. It just is very humbling to me that I have this opportunity, and what a great time to be chair of Black Studies. Yeah. All the different things going on. So I'm just glad that we can celebrate all of the wins, all of the resistance, all of the struggle. I'm just glad that we can celebrate any of it, and that we are still here to have that celebration.
Dr. Robinson, I would imagine that you inspire a lot of students, colleagues, and all the rest. I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here, who inspires you?
I will have to say that academically, or besides family, immediate family, I grew up in a family with very strong females, and so I learned how to fight and fight back. But when I think academically, I am a Goodrich Scholar. The Goodrich Scholarship Program is also turning 50 next academic year. I have also been tenured, and I have been teaching for the last 20 years in the School of Communication. The School of Communication, the discipline of communication is, I don't even know how to explain how important that discipline is as important to me as my Black Studies discipline. So that is what I try to merge all of that. Academically, what I've learned from Goodrich, how to be, and what I've learned from Black Studies and communication, those disciplines, and that has shaped who I am. And of course, family, close friends.
And you're going to be merging those two, doing presentations here, throughout the week. How do you prepare for that? I mean, obviously knowing your audience, but it's going to be different every time. How did you prepare your presentation?
I just did a lot of research. I prepared a very nice PowerPoint slide. I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I have like 4 presentations. I'm going to try to be like, Beyonce. You're going to get it in Chicago, you're going to get it in Atlanta, you're going to get it in New York, you're going to get it in LA. So I'm just trying to bring the best of me and what I have, and calling on the ancestors for strength and for courage and to say the right thing at the right time. So just preparing in that way. I want to make sure that we understand these are humans we are talking about. These are people we are talking about, and what the legacy of race-based slavery was to this country, how it impacted this country, and how it still impacts this country. The gun legislation is connected to race-based slavery. January 6th is connected to race-based slavery, and so we can talk about that at another time. But I want people to understand that this is not, oh yeah, slavery was what it was, oh yeah, Black History Month, oh yeah, Juneteenth. No, this is all connected, and it connects all of us.
Can I ask you, in all the education that you have done, all the presentations that you have made, has there been one question that you have fielded that just stays with you, and you kind of take that forward? Maybe it was a question and how you responded, or maybe it was a person in the audience. Is there that one thing that comes to mind for you in all of your experiences?
I don't think so. I think for me, I am always amazed that I'm having this conversation, that I'm the person that people are looking to for leadership in this. And I guess because I think about the greatness, the people that came before me, the people, for example, who went to jail so there could be a Black Studies. I don't know when I was an undergrad if I could have done that. I think about the people who gave their life, not wanting to give their life, but gave their life. So I think about all of that. And so I'm very, very, very humble, or I try to stay humble in this. I don't really think that there was any thing that people would ask me that would really, but it's more of, wow, this is happening.
Okay, we have less than a minute, actually 30 seconds, right? Talking with Dr. Cynthia Robinson today about Juneteenth. What message do you want to leave our viewers with?
Fight against white supremacy if you want to save this country. Fight for what is right. Stand up and keep fighting. Don't stop fighting. If people would not have fought, Black people would still be in chains today. Women would not be able to vote. There wouldn't be public education. Don't stop fighting. There is a poem by Claude McKay, "If we must die, fight back."
I want to thank you today for sharing your time and expertise and being the voice of all of this. Thank you so much. Best wishes, especially this weekend, and to you moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
If people want more information, they can go to unomaha.edu, juneteenth.com, or call 402-554-2412. I want to thank our guests for being here today, and to all of you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.